So I'm looking at the comments on my new Thunderbolts video, and I start to notice something. A lot of comments to the effect of, "You liked She-Hulk? You're crazy." Or, "She-Hulk is the worst Marvel show." And I think that's strange, because I really do love this show. So does everybody I talk to. At least they all like it. Nobody hates it. So I go on YouTube, and who to my wandering eyes do appear but a bunch of YouTubers with videos about how She-Hulk is the worst TV show ever made. It made me want to come out with a video to explain why I love She-Hulk. And if you're wondering, well, why are you making this video now? There are still a couple of episodes left that have not been released. Well, A, I need a video for the end of the month, and B, I think there are people out there watching these takedown videos who've given up on the show, and I want to do my part while it is still going to make the case for why these people can get on board and enjoy the next few weeks. So I'm going to break down why I believe She-Hulk is the best Marvel Disney Plus show. I want to be very clear here. I'm not counting the Netflix stuff for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or Runaways or any of that. Just MCU Disney Plus, WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Loki, What If, Hawkeye, Moon Knight, and Miss Marvel. And my thoughts will be in a numbered list because that's how these videos go. And then I want to talk about what's going on with the other side. Look at a couple of videos about why She-Hulk is the worst thing ever and see what they hate so much. Besides, you know. But before I do that, I want to spend a couple of minutes with some criticism, so you don't think I'm just ignoring all of the show's flaws, because it's not perfect. Like in number one, I do agree that in general, what the MCU has done with Bruce Banner Hulk does not always work. It will forever baffle me that Hulk's biggest single moment when it comes to developing his character happens off-screen. And I understand that it may not have been great for the flow of Infinity War, but that doesn't mean it can't be done at all. Cutting down on the moment with Black Widow could have worked. So I understand people who say of She-Hulk, it's dumb that we're getting this whole Hulk lesson from Bruce, and we never actually get to see Bruce go through the merging of his personalities. And the Hulk as a character feels like he's been largely forgotten about by the MCU. Something like that doesn't really bother me that much, but I get it. I'm sure a lot of it has to do with how they don't completely have the rights to the Hulk, so he hasn't gotten a solo movie. I'm sure if they did, they would have gotten a Hulk solo movie sometime in phase 2. And maybe we'd get to explore the character more then. Second criticism, the CGI is not always great. I will say, there are some times when I think it looks pretty terrific. Pretty much everything in episode 1 looked movie quality for me. And a lot of the shots that ended up in the trailers have solid effects. But there are plenty of other moments, like the ones at the law firm, where the CGI is pretty rough. I'm a little bit more sympathetic here because of all the recent articles about how Marvel is working all their VFX artists to death. It seems like an awful situation, and they need to sort that out. But if you watch the show and think the CGI is distracting, I get it. Although, like I said, I think it's more often good than bad. And then the third criticism. This is a small nitpicky one, but it's really bugged me ever since I saw the first episode. What's the deal with She-Hulk getting drunk? Bruce treats it like a positive. It is, in fact, the first positive aspect of being a Hulk presented in the episode. However, Bruce says we can drink as much as we want and never get drunk. All buzz, no barf. Which, that's not a good thing, right? Sometimes the fun of drinking is getting drunk. Like in Cap 1, Steve laments that his system metabolizes alcohol so fast that he cannot get drunk, so that's a drawback. But then if that's not enough, the next morning Jen wakes up with a Hulk-sized hangover, so you do get drunk enough to have a massive hangover? That's pretty bad. It's like the worst of both worlds. Then, in a recent episode, Nikki lists as a positive that Jen cannot get a hangover. So which one is it? Not a show breaker for sure, but it does not make very much sense, and I wish they'd never brought it up at all. I feel like the right way this logic works out is that the benefit is that Jen, as a human, can get hammered, but as long as she hulks out for a moment or two before going to bed, her body can metabolize the alcohol quickly, and she does not have a hangover the next morning. Like, I'm definitely overthinking it, but while I was watching the show, I thought I was losing my mind. Anyway, those are my 3 negatives. But let's talk about the reasons that I think She-Hulk is the best Marvel show. I've got 3 of them too. 4 if you count. Number A, She-Hulk is funny. Now, your mileage on this one will vary. Everyone finds different things funny, and I am very picky when it comes to comedy, but some parts of She-Hulk just really worked for me. Mainly it was the juxtaposition, putting a character or archetype into a situation that only exists in the MCU. Drunk bachelorette partygoer sees a portal to another dimension and goes, ew. Judge hears the Asgard is not a place, it's a people speech and strikes it down. Asgardian construction workers. I think it's just funny. Also, there's a lot of very smart editing. I must depart, and then Wong leaves. Wonderful. Quick, silly, and we move on. And if anyone wonders, why is Wong able to go to court next week? I don't know, if the president pardoned him because he's the Sorcerer Supreme and he basically has diplomatic immunity. Also, he's Wong. We all love Wong. Also, maybe he made him all forget with this spell. But okay, I'm not counting this as like a universal positive because I don't think highlighting it makes much of a point. Either you think it's funny or you did not. But point 1, She-Hulk is the first Marvel show that seems to know how to be a show. There's something to be said for effectively utilizing the medium in which you exist. And a common complaint among the Marvel shows is that they feel like a 3-hour movie cut up into 6 pieces and thrown on Disney+. And I think for quite a few of them, this is a fair criticism. Frequently, the episodes don't feel like their own concise story. While the episodes can be separated by certain storytelling functions or a change in location or something like that, it still feels like Falcon and the Winter Soldier or Hawkeye or Miss Marvel could be better served by cutting out a bunch of the fluff and editing the entire thing into a 2-hour-long movie. Really, the only ones that did this right were What If, which I'm not a huge fan of, WandaVision, which I love, and Loki, which is also very good. So 2 of the best shows in the MCU have done this right, and I think She-Hulk might be the best at it. Specifically because, unlike Loki or WandaVision, She-Hulk is very explicitly a sitcom, and part of the charm of a sitcom is that while there are big season-long arcs like Diane warming up to Sam or Mac getting fat, the episodes themselves are largely disconnected and can be watched out of order without breaking the entire thing. And once everything was in motion, starting with episodes 3 and 4, I think we've really managed to hit that balance. It can be pretty effectively highlighted by focusing on the legal aspect of the series. Every episode is another case, sometimes 2 in 1 episode. Every case presents a new challenge, introduces a few new characters, and after 22 minutes, everything is wrapped up nice and neat. I think I could show someone episode 1 and then skip to episode 4 and they'd mostly get it. And I know some people don't like this, the disconnection at the heart of the show. But for me, it's a feature, not a bug. And whether you like everything about She-Hulk or not, I think it's hard to deny that it's living up to the promise of superhuman law sitcom. If you don't like the idea of sitcoms, then sure, this is not going to work for you. But as someone who grew up on Seinfeld and Simpsons, and is currently into shows like Always Sunny and Rick and Morty, I appreciate how She-Hulk is the first MCU show that has embraced the sitcom format. Point 2. She-Hulk expands on the MCU in interesting ways. We have introduced so many characters and concepts in She-Hulk with barely any legwork, because this is the first show that is explicitly about a character dealing with the superhuman side of the universe that we don't really see. Moon Knight was all Egyptian gods. Miss Marvel was all clandestines. They did not have, for instance, a sorcerer just show up. It wouldn't make sense, and that's fine. Thematically, it is consistent with the scope of the story. But it's pretty wild that even though Earth is full of aliens and Asgardians and all sorts of gods and enhanced people, outside of the Shang-Chi cage fight, we have not had an Earthbound show where characters just bump into something weird, or acknowledge the weirdness in the rest of the world. Like She-Hulk is the first MCU show to properly acknowledge the celestial in the middle of the ocean. Like, that's incredible. Because one problem with Phase 4 is that apart from Wong, it's felt sort of disconnected. We don't have those little moments where Coulson mentions a thing he has to deal with that signal to us that Thor also exists in this world. Or Bruce Banner casually mentioning Wakanda. We need that outside of the big team-up movies to keep everything balanced. Ground the world in some shared reality, even if it is a weird one. Phase 4 does a fair amount of world building, but it's almost always giving context to past events. Stuff from the last few phases. Kamala tells us about the end of Endgame. Hawkeye watches the Avengers musical. We've gotten plenty of context for things in the past, but the recent past? There have been so many world-altering events that never get mentioned. Like, did anyone else experience the time Mr. Knight and Khonshu turned back the whole sky? Or that kaiju fight from the end of the series? As far as we know, it happened in the MCU, and She-Hulk would be a perfect place for, say, Pug to mention that he's so drunk everything is spinning, but not like that time the stars all flew around, or something like that, just to make the MCU feel connected. Because it currently doesn't. Nobody has brought up the Gargantos attack, any of the Statue of Liberty stuff, Hawkeye shooting goons in 30 Rock on Christmas, the Taskmaster chase, the attack on New Asgard, the Shang-Chi bus fight, and anything from Eternals besides Kingo existing. And these things all happen in public, so I love the idea of a character who gets to react to them, or a show that would not feel weird if it acknowledged them. And it's clear that Phase 4 was jumbled by the pandemic. Lots of movies changed spots, so plenty of the direct references wouldn't play, but one show, like She-Hulk, could wrap a lot of that up at the end. We know that it comes last, so She-Hulk gets to be sort of a greatest hits of the phase. But even beyond that, She-Hulk's world building has really impressed me because of how much they've trusted the audience. Like, a light elf shows up. We've never seen them or heard of them before. But the writers know if they look and act a specific way, we'll get that this thing is a Thor thing. Or Mr. Immortal. He's a mutant. In the comics, he has the power to live forever, and it's really weird. He was the leader of the Great Lake Avengers for a little bit, and while this version of the character was certainly a take on the hero, it fits into the universe well. I love that we are able to run into characters like this without explanation. It just makes the world feel so much bigger. And if you are upset that Mr. Immortal is now an older philanderer and not the character from the Great Lakes Avengers, he does apparently have a son, so that character can be Mr. Immortal or something. Third thing I like, Jen is an interesting, likable character. Thanks for unpausing reaction, guys. I have heard lots of discourse that Jen is not an interesting character because she has no flaws. She never does anything wrong, and she dismisses Bruce, her kind older cousin, which I think is a wild misreading of the entire series. Jen's biggest flaw is that she's just sort of arrogant, like this guy, or this guy, or this guy, or this guy. Jen believes she's going to be better at being a Hulk than she actually is and dismisses people offering her help, until she doesn't. We haven't gotten there yet, but I do have a feeling when Jen meets the other lawyer superhero, he's going to have something to say about the whole work-life balance thing. I also like that Jen feels like an adult. Maybe it's just because I am also in my 30s, but I can really relate to the idea of having to go on bad dates or attend a chaotic wedding. That's why this conversation that Jen has in the beginning of episode 1 with Bruce feels apt. Jen talking about how Steve never got to have sex is both a fun conversation that all nerds have had at some point, but also an acknowledgement that the MCU's second lead character never got to just slow down and date. At least not so far as we see. So She-Hulk exploring that is refreshing, especially since Tony being a little playboy was one of the things that drew us to the MCU. He had a sense of humor, felt human. We've gotten those relatable adult relationships from, oh look, this guy, this guy, this guy, and this guy. So I do really like Jen and all of her supporting characters. Nikki, Pug, really loved their dynamic as a group, and I like that we have little Nikki and Pug adventures. I appreciate what they've done with Mallory Book, a character who plays an important role in the Slott comic run from '04. Jen's family is fun, Wong and Madison, Patty Harrison, it all works for me. That's why I found it so odd when so many YouTubers came after this show so hard. And I mean, you know, I know it's the usual everything is woke crowd, but I was still curious, what are they saying and why? Well, most of their complaints fell into 3 buckets: criticism, nonsense, and woke. The criticism is the gateway here. They say things like, they should have given Jen more adversity to contrast with her being a Hulk, which maybe not quite as cut and dry for me, but if that's how you feel, more power to you. They find her unlikable because they think she's too mean to Bruce. We'll get to it, but sure, maybe you are just not a fan of any character who would dismiss a helpful Bruce Banner, whatever. Maybe they don't like the editing or the acting, which that one I don't really get. Say what you will about the writing, but I think the actors are all doing excellent jobs. But they will throw out some criticism and do that thing that I used to do where you give tips on how to improve it. And this is part of why I don't do those videos anymore. It can be annoying. I'll make a video about exactly why later. And then they will also talk about the message, how Marvel is too woke. And listen, obviously it's silly, right? Who uses woke unironically these days? Who are you, Bill Maher? But these guys do. And first of all, they love to talk about how Marvel focuses too much on politics, and I want to make a distinction here. Just because you disagree with someone about something does not make it politics. Because politics are easy to dismiss. It's something that people believe you should keep out of entertainment, which is a dumb thing to say in general because all shows and movies you like are political. Star Wars is the Vietnam War and the Viet Cong are the rebels and America's the Empire. Don't believe me?
And it was the same thing with the Vietnamese. Yep. The irony of that one is in both of those, the little guys won. Right. And the big, highly technical empire,
the English Empire, right?
The English Empire, the American Empire, yep, lost.
Yeah.
That was the whole point.
Thanks, George. Pretty political, but nobody minds. Mad Men, Game of Thrones, Terminator 2, Shawshank, Mad Max. All very political, written by people who are not subtle about the messages of their shows or movies. But okay, Those are other movies, but the MCU, that's different. I mean, sure, Iron Man is a war profiteer, Thor is part of an imperialist regime, Captain America is wearing a flag, but none of that counts. This is political. And Captain Marvel. And I'm gonna guess her for Moon Knight. That's when it becomes a thing. These people treat it like it's a new thing, but this has always been how the Marvel Cinematic Universe works. So when they're saying political, they mean, you know, progressive. Specifically, the progressive things they do not like the idea of mansplaining, or I guess the idea of a woman talking about mansplaining. That's political. Not the Mandarin or Hydra, that. But if they just did not like it because it was too woke, I wouldn't care. I mean, I think it's dumb, but plenty of people are dumb about plenty of things. What are you gonna do? But that's not the end of it. Because they're not just trying to make the case that these shows are bad and also woke. They believe these shows are bad because they are woke. And this is why it gets on my nerves. They use legitimate criticism to launder all of this woke nonsense. And I know what you're thinking. Legitimate criticism? Isn't all criticism legitimate? Why are you in charge of what's good and bad criticism? Sure, I'll give you an example. Saying you don't like She-Hulk's design because it doesn't look like the comics or something. Legitimate criticism. But saying you don't like She-Hulk's design because she's blue. Illegitimate criticism. Bad. Because it is not blue. Like, we can see this character and we know what's actually going on. So any conclusion drawn from that illegitimate criticism is pointless. So this is where their third type of complaint comes in.
Nonsense.
Deliberate or otherwise, these guys just frequently miss the point of scenes or just completely misunderstand the show itself. It's kind of impressive. Like on one of their unbearably long podcasts, and I should know I run an unbearably long podcast called Mostly Nitpicking. You're welcome to subscribe and listen to us. But on one, a certain YouTuber made the point that Jen basically catfished the guy she slept with. He was confused when he saw Jen and left, and they blamed Jen because she misrepresented herself, didn't give that poor guy a heads up. What a jerk. Except she did. It's in the episode. We watched it. She tells him about transforming from Jen to She-Hulk, and he acknowledges the stress that situation creates, so he's on board. He just does not like Jen, like he says in the very next episode, which is fine. He doesn't have to. You can have one-night stands. It's dating. But he is pretty weird about it. Jen is not in the wrong here at all. But these guys never give her the benefit of the doubt. Every situation needs to be about Jen being a jerk. An unlikable, ungrateful jerk. So that's where they start. And when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Take the Bruce training sequence. They will say that everything involving Bruce only exists to show us how much better Jen is than Bruce. That she is stronger and smarter, and the show is tearing him down, making him look like a fool, and making Jen look perfect. Except, if you watch the show, Jen is far from perfect in those interactions, and Bruce is almost completely right. Everything he tells Jen that she ignores would solve her big problems. In episodes 3, 4, and 5, Jen is having trouble balancing her She-Hulk life with her lawyer life. Specifically, she is denying the She-Hulk part. Jen spends 2 entire episodes explaining how she just wants nothing to do with the name She-Hulk, only to have that cause problems in episode 5. If Jen had embraced this part of her life, she would not need to wrestle the copyright away from Titania because Jen would already have it. But a more media-savvy character who knows the value of branding and the superhero image is able to challenge Jen. When Jen is dating, she can't find balance. Jen dates losers as Jen, and she says she's not interested in finding a partner, but she does clearly want some companionship. Then she goes full She-Hulk, finds a bunch of guys who only like her as She-Hulk, and they don't work either. Jen needs to find balance between being She-Hulk and Jen. Sure, we don't see it happen, but Bruce explains it in Endgame. We want the best of both worlds. That's what Jen needs. But she refuses, partially because she is scared of getting out of her comfort zone, and partially because she thinks she does not need help. The transforming was easy for Jen, the rest of it must be too. But these guys don't get that. They say that all this stuff is pointless because Bruce has nothing to teach her, but they're just plain wrong. Bruce is being very clear, and it's honestly hard to miss. In the end, these guys don't want Jen to be a flawed, interesting character. That would mean the show is good. They want her to be a Mary Sue. So they watch these scenes and draw these conclusions, and then boom, woke show, bad show. Now, I'm not saying if you do not like She-Hulk for any reason, that makes you a bad person. Of course not. And I'm not saying that I think the show is flawless. I do really enjoy it, but it's not always sunny or cheers. But what I am saying is that the people driving the conversation, With millions of views, these YouTubers are either purposefully misrepresenting the show or completely misunderstanding it. And they will talk all this nonsense and draw conclusions. These YouTubers will tell you that the show is attacking men. She-Hulk hates men, the writers hate men. But it's just not true. There are so many positive men on the show. Pug, Wong, her dad, Daredevil eventually, Bruce, Abomination for now, and a bunch of others I'm not going to mention because I don't want to, spoil episodes you may not have seen. The show is full of good guys. The writers of the show don't hate men. They hate bullies, like Captain America did. And the jerks that cause Jen the most trouble happen to be largely men. But you don't need to take that as an attack on you because you're not a jerk. Or you don't have to be. But all of the men in the show exist, some version of them. They're obviously heightened for comedy and superhero purposes, but they're out there, and they are in the minority. But if we all agree that they exist, and they bother lonely women at bars, the show should talk about that, and we should all enjoy watching She-Hulk scare them together. And I wasn't going to call anybody out, but I kind of need to for this. There's a channel called The Critical Drinker. Don't know much about him beyond what I can glean from his She-Hulk videos, but man, now I'm not going to play the video. I'm going to read it to you because I don't want him to be able to give me a copyright strike and get paid. I'm going to do the best I can to capture the spirit of how he said it so it doesn't seem like I'm misrepresenting the video. You're welcome to go watch it yourself. Only for her to run into a group of evil men outside. I mean, I assume they're evil because that's clearly what the writer wants us to think. The problem is they don't really do anything all that bad. I mean, they show some mild interest in Jen, who's clearly not that interested, but when they persist, she hulks up and almost kills all of them. So we all know what these guys are doing is not being a bit too forward. They're harassing her. She's scared that they're going to be violent. And I mean, they're surrounding her in a parking lot, so that's bad. And we know that. You know that. You wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. Practically none of us would. So those are the men. The ones that we are meant to hate along with She-Hulk. It's not everybody, just a small group of bullies. The problem is, some guys with big platforms who think what the guys in this clip are doing is not that bad, feel like the show is calling out all men because it's calling out them, and we shouldn't listen to them. They call people betas. They clearly don't deserve to be taken seriously. In Philadelphia, we have a word for people like them. Jabronis. Like in their video analyzing why the trailer makes She-Hulk look bad, this jabroni went out of his way twice to tell you how Jen was ungrateful for the powers she volunteered for. And if you've read the comics or have even the vaguest passing idea of She-Hulk's backstory, you know how wild of an assumption that is. And he uses that to justify Jen being whiny. Why is she whining about these powers she asked for, I assume for no reason? But she didn't, of course. That has never been Jen's origin. But this guy doesn't know that, otherwise this would be an insane conclusion to jump to. But he is using it to judge the show, and specifically Jen's attitude problem. Complaining about something bad that happens to you, that's normal. But complaining about something you signed up for, that's whiny. So she's probably doing that second thing because Jen's a bad character, even though the show hasn't come out yet. And in their next video, called She-Hulk, it's a comedy, they look back at the show's first few episodes to determine whether the show's comedy works for them. Oh, no? They rush out a video analyzing the one scene that has been released at the time. Can't see how that could backfire. So he goes over the only scene that has been released thus far, Jen's conversation with Bruce in the car. And this jabroni, looking to find something to hate about Jen and the writers of the show, takes issue with Jen's description of Steve's sex life. And I kid you not, calls Jen and the writers out for forgetting that Steve was on the USO tour for a while and probably had sex there. So this guy rushes to come up with a reason why the show is not good and jumps the gun using the first clip he can find. And that's what he says. And if you've watched the show, you know why calling the show out for this is hilarious. But what's he supposed to do? Wait until there's more than one scene? We need to prove that the show is bad immediately. Even their bad ideas about what woke means don't really hold up to any scrutiny. They say that Marvel has rules now, like that women can't lose a fight to a man. Solid rule. As long as you don't count Wanda, her, the Ancient One, Killmonger's girlfriend, this Dora Milaje, these Dora Milaje, these two, Gamora, Nebula, Gamora again, Nebula again, these two, Wanda again, Ghost, Ghost again, her again, her again, her again, and my personal favorite, her. And to be fair, those are all Phase 3. There probably aren't any in Phase 4. You know, besides Monica, the TVA agent, Makari again, Sprite, Kate a bunch, May, Wanda again, Love and Thunder spoilers, Sif, and Valkyrie. Okay, well that's not important, because they have another rule. Women can't be wrong. You know, except for when Wanda enslaves a whole town. Agatha's the bad guy. Carly kills a bunch of people for no reason. She's a bad guy. She's a bad guy. Sprite joins the bad guys. Kate gets caught a lot. Kate's mom is a bad guy. Najima's the bad guy. The damage control lady is a bad guy. His mom is abusive. She kills everybody. Titania's a bad guy. And the most wrong thing, Kamala makes her dad sad. So accepting their premise, their own rules, that they wrote, Marvel's not that woke. These jabronis get tons of facts about the show wrong, but they're not dumb. So what's going on here? They want this show to be bad because it is woke, and they want to be right. 2 of their She-Hulk videos contain some version of the sentence, well, I thought this show would be bad and woke, and I was absolutely right. They want you to think that woke equals bad, and it just doesn't. There is good progressive media and bad progressive media. And I understand how this can be difficult to parse as a viewer. From what I've seen, not all of their opinions are weird. This guy liked RRR, a notoriously not political movie, but cool. And he'll do that suggesting changes thing that I used to do, and sometimes his suggestions are fine. Not, you know, groundbreaking, but fine. So you start watching these channels and you go, I like what they're saying. They're making sense. But then they come out talking about how the show is too woke. Why does this show need to have Jen, a woman, save Bruce, a man? It's just woke propaganda and not, oh, I don't know, the #1 rule of character development. So much film 101 that one of the books is named after it. Just have a character save someone or something the audience likes. Then we like them. But nah, it's probably just woke propaganda, right? That's why she does it. And you like this guy, the jabroni, and he's been right about other stuff before, so you feel like they must be right about this too. And even if you like the show and you have no problem with wokeness, it's fun to go along with it. In conclusion, why did I make this video? Well, 3 reasons. 1, I really genuinely enjoy this show and want to use my platform to talk about why. I have always been a humongous fan of the She-Hulk comics, and the Dan Slott 04 run is easily a top 3 favorite comics run of all time for me. 2, there are so many negative videos out there, and I think if someone who's not sold one way or the other goes on YouTube to see what people are saying about the show, I want them to at least see a positive take, because regardless of what these guys think, the show is popular. The numbers for it are pretty good. About as many people are watching it as watched Moon Knight, according to Nielsen, and they're not all hate watching. But the 3rd reason I made this video, because I do think there are going to be plenty of other people making similar points to mine, but I imagine many of them will be women. And I think there's a chance people won't watch those videos, or might not listen to them. Of course they like this show. The YouTuber told me the show is for women who hate men, which is what they must be. But I'm a guy. I like this show, and I want to tell other guys listening that it is okay to like it, and you do not need to listen to these jabronis when they invent reason after reason why it's a bad show, even though most of those things don't actually happen. If you don't agree with everything I've said, that's fine. But don't listen to these guys about how everything is too woke. The MCU. It's embarrassing. That's not why some of these shows and movies aren't as good as the old ones. Probably mostly because they're making too many of them, and also COVID screwed things up. If you don't like She-Hulk, don't like it. That's fine. But you deserve better. People who will critique a show based on what actually happens in that show, and not some version that exists in their head to justify their weird beliefs. And you deserve better than people who think that 3 guys chasing a woman through a parking lot isn't that bad. Before we go, I do have one other Hulk nitpick. What's with all the stubble? Why does the Hulk have stubble now? Does he need to shave? Does he shave every day? Or is all of his hair just like that way forever? Because if he shaves, he could use an AL13 razor from this video sponsor, Henson Shaving. Boy, they're cool. These guys started making razors after the pandemic forced them to stop making parts for the space station. So they made a razor. Now, I have never used one of these guys before, not like this. I've had the plastic kind with a billion blades that you throw away, and then, you know, they make a big pile in a landfill, and Captain Planet cries. But these guys have no plastic. It's a solid aluminum razor, and it comes with little blades that you put in yourself. It's versatile and gives you a remarkably close shave. The blade is held in place super well, so there's no razor burn, and it's so easy to use. It looks nice, it's easy to clean, and because you're only buying replacement blades and not the big plastic things with like 5 blades in them, using one of these is so much cheaper over the course of a year than the plastic ones. And if you use my promo code NANDO at checkout, you get 100 free blades. And I had to check that because I was like, wait, 100? And it's like, yeah, 100 comes in this box here. It's a real nice shave, cool looking razor. Go check them out. Links in the description. So before I go, thank you to everybody that supports the channel on Patreon, everybody that listens to my podcast, mostly nitpicking, and everybody who's subscribed to my second channel, The Nando Cut. That's all I got. Stay safe. I'll see you next time.